Hi y'all, I decided to start a little series called Fan Film Histories, where I would look at various fan films and discuss some of their history. I mainly want to cover a lot of obscure ones, though I also want to cover ones that are not quite obscure, but also not quite well known either, such as the Raiders of the Lost Ark adaptation, Spider-Man and the Green Goblin's Last Stand. And I don't think I'll ever cover Spider-Man Lotus, since it's been talked about too much, but I'll consider it if I can look at it through a different approach. For the first episode, I'm going to talk about fan films based on The Legend of Zelda, including my own. Now, I'm only going to talk about ones that are feature-length live-acted performances, especially if they have a lot of history to cover, so I won't be covering short films, although I might cover those in their own video at some point. However, I want to bring attention to a lot of the niche Zelda films that I really love and think deserve attention, so without further ado, let us dive into the history of various Zelda fan movies. Legend of Link dates all the way back to 2005, even a little before YouTube. In fact, before being uploaded to YouTube, it was first uploaded to Google Video. Yes, I remember Google Video. I'm old. It was created by a low-budget studio called Obsession Studios, which likely doesn't even exist anymore. And it was run by a group of high school students at St. Xavier High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. The director was a man named Danny Sammons Jr., and unfortunately I can't find a photo of him. It was made as a spoof of Zelda, spoofing many elements from Ocarina of Time as well as other elements from nerd culture. Some parts are played straight, but a good majority of it is comedy. One of the best gags is the fact that Link does not speak at all throughout the entire movie, and implies speech like the video games
do. Link himself. I see that you got the Megaton hammer out of that chest over there. What are your comments about the situation?
Marvin, we're not getting any sound input. Do you think you can check the mics?
Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. Link, could you please repeat that? Fantastic!
It's very interesting.
Thanks, Martin, for those interesting insights.
Ganondorf is also hilariously hammy and acts absolutely petty and over the top to his subordinates, ironically making for an unironically great comedic villain, which makes me think this could have been how the late Robin Williams would have played Ganondorf had he had the chance.
Kill!
What are you playing?
Halo 2, duh.
What is Halo?
What a noob.
Did you just say, what is Halo?
What is this Halo?
Noob.
The movie was shot on Hi-8, and it is very reminiscent of the Dead Gentleman's The Gamers movie, and it is clear that the filmmakers had a lot of fun making this.
Brother,
You should mask the door! This idiot didn't.
hey, you know what? I don't have to listen to your crowd. Oh, listen.
Go! Ah! 1,500 life points.
Unfortunately, some of it had to be edited for copyright problems with the music, and you can find the full 2-hour movie on YouTube, though some of it is either cut or sped up for copyright reasons. However, Rare Kong has a channel with the entirety of it in his playlist, some of the videos being unlisted, but it's still there in the playlist, so definitely check that out if you want the full experience. As this came out in 2005, this may be the very first feature-length adaptation of Zelda, unless someone has a tape of a fan film they made in the 90s lying around somewhere and gathering dust. I also am not too sure how real this is, but on this Herotonova wiki page, it states that somebody named Eloy A. Rosario, who owns Heroton Productions, wants to do a remake of this film. Here, it would be a serious remake using elements from the original plot, though they originally wanted to do a shot-for-shot remake, and then of course it eventually evolved into something different, kind of like a Ship of Theseus type of scenario. So far, there are still no updates on it, though I feel he may still be interested in it, and it may be in development hell. As for what I have to say about this film, it is really funny and fun to watch, and it's a very family-friendly spoof. It's almost similar to Shrek in a way, and it was one of the first fan films I ever watched. I remember that I only watched parts of it, back then, and since some parts were serious, I didn't know it was a spoof until I watched more of it, but I loved it and wanted to do my own comedy similar to this at one point. Considering that this inspired Legend of Young Link and Eloy A. Rosario's planned remake, I can say that as niche as this is, it very much left an impact and even inspired my own fan film, as subtle as the inspirations are. I don't know whatever happened to Obsession Studios or the people who worked on it, but considering this film is 20 years old now, I'm hoping they could do some kind of 20-year look back, maybe even a podcast to discuss more history and the aftermath. I highly recommend this for Zelda fans, and I think it's an important piece of Zelda fan film history, and even just fan film history in general. And I hope to see the planned remake come out soon if ever it comes out. The Legend of Young Link is a fan film made by a group of kids, their studio called Real Life Glitch Productions, and they mentioned that this fan film was inspired by Legend of Link. It also came out in 2007, so this is well before Neil, Sage of Darkness, and Hero of Time. Just like Legend of Link, it was anachronistic, though a lot more obvious, as it mostly took place in an urban neighborhood, and featured idiosyncrasies such as riding bikes instead of horses, using regular clothes, using toy lightsabers in some instances, and contemporary rock music in a few moments. It also features a silent Link, and there's a MacGuffin with a Deku orb, and just like Legend of Link, they see the Great Deku Tree, whose speech is in text instead of voice. A scene obviously inspired by the milk bar is included. Ganon has a sidekick named Bill, and while not having a dungeon crawl moment, there is a moment where they go through this tunnel, and Link, still gathers his gear much like he does in the games or some kind of D&D session. One funny thing is that in one moment they're using a bow and arrow, and they use, old coat hangers for it. I'm not even criticizing this. I think it has a special charm with the homemade aspects and is a fun little idiosyncrasy. And also, as Twilight Princess was new at this time, they go into the Twilight Realm, which is done in a sepia style. One unique thing was that it seems to have been edited with Windows Movie Maker, and it was clearly done by the kids just for fun. It was uploaded in clips back in 2007, like a lot of other fan films, but then it was compiled into its full 2 hours and 3 minute long run. In the description, you'll see that they also have a link to a new channel called Real Life Glitch Entertainment, which has this and more content they've done. They've done some reaction commentaries, looking back on the project after so many years, which is enduring. I'd love to see Hero Time, Sage of Darkness, and Legend of Link do 20-year look-back commentaries as well. They're also still active on this channel, which is nice since most people who have done these fan films are silent after a while. Oh, and also, on this channel you can also see a little documentary where they talk about real-life Glitch Productions.
Alright, so the history of ROGPS started back in
the end of 2006, early 2007.
We were just a group of friends just hanging out, and our leader, or Director Jay, he came up with a group for making videos, and we started about 2006, 2007, and it was only about 5 of us back then, maybe 4.
In the end, it's clear this film was trying to be like Legend of Link, and I find that admirable. Unfortunately, in this era, people are obsessed with perfection and everything looking perfect, which is discouraging to young filmmakers. It's more encouraging to know that everyone starts somewhere, and these guys are no exception. I mean, so many filmmakers start out ripping off other movies, and I'm no exception, as my first attempt was a cringy ripoff of Star Wars.
You can never ever beat me again. I am your father.
This is unique in that it was trying to mimic not a big budget movie, but a rather niche fan film, which is very charming. It's also nice to see that they look back on it fondly and embrace it and have done some behind the scenes content with it, and I hope this could inspire other fan filmmakers. We have to stop acting like everyone must start out perfect and accept that everyone has to start somewhere, and maybe new coming filmmakers will gain more confidence. Just like Legend of Link, this series, The Legend of Neil, is a spoof of the Zelda games, this one from a studio called F and Funny. That's literally what it's called. Unlike Legend of Link, which was family friendly, this one is really crass, but also really, really funny. Unlike the Land of the Lost movie, which was also a crass spoof, this one is a spoof that's actually well put together, the jokes are funny and clever, and it's the right kind of stupid, in which it's stupid but the jokes actually make sense. Sandeep Parikh and Tony Janning wrote it while drunk, talking of all the hilarious, most inappropriate things they could think of, and they first filmed it on a very low-budget guerrilla style. This is especially difficult when filming Neil butt-naked and having to look out for passersby. They also used brown paper to create the caves, which they did in their apartments. I've also done similar things in my own movies as well. They utilized cheap but charming practical effects such as the German skeletons, the geese, and the dragon. They were inspired by both Zelda and Dragon's Lair, utilizing a campiness to add to that charm. They eventually got more of a demand for more and got help from Comedy Central, giving them some more money to ramp up the production value. Due to budgetary reasons, they left Ganon's face in the shadows, not revealed until Season 2, in which there's a meta joke to go along with it. This also worked in its favor, as just like the Fire Lord in Avatar, and they basically had him built up, and I feel like if a serious adaptation was ever made, I would love to do is have Ganon be in the shadows or have his face hidden until he's revealed a little later. Similar to what I did in my film. Even with a better budget, they still took shortcuts such as cleverly using similar areas and just rearranging the sets. They also got more money to create the Moblins, which I absolutely love the practical effects for. Very reminiscent of the orcs from Lord of the Rings, but more cartoony, which isn't a bad thing. They also gave more personality to some characters such as the Moblins, and they made the Wizrobe a character who works for Ganon and is abused by him. While CGI was used when necessary, they use a ton of practical effects, which I love for the dungeons, the Gibdos, etc. I also love the hell out of this cemetery set, and I hope a serious Zelda movie could utilize something similar to this. In terms of story, it does follow the basic plot of the first game, including adding the sword, the white sword, and the magic sword, which is theorized to be the Master Sword lost to time due to the Downfall timeline. While the first game was very charming, endearing, and ambitious for its time, it was the first game and was very lacking in story and lore, so they were able to take more liberties to add more character to the series. And while it's a spoof, it's still funny and enjoyable to watch. I first got the DVD and watched it a year after finishing my film, and it made me think of how I could have done so many things differently. I was afraid to watch this a while ago due to the crass humor, but this series is very soft R, about somewhere in the TVMA range. I mean, it is not for young children, but it doesn't go into obscenity. Even though there's some level of nudity, it's always comedically censored, kind of like Austin Powers, so there's nothing dangerous seen. All in all, this is one of my favorite Zelda fan films, and it is really funny, charming, and enjoyable to watch. The low-budget production value is great, and the behind-the-scenes content is a lot of fun. It's all on YouTube, but I highly recommend getting the DVD as well, as we must keep physical media alive. This is very much like the early days of YouTube, similar to classic Angry Video Game Nerd or the Channel Awesome anniversary movies, and it is a fun watch, but it's definitely not for the kids. The Sage of Darkness. This is a favorite of mine, and I still hold it in high regard as my most favorite Zelda fan film, as well as one of my most favorite fan films in general next to the Raiders adaptation and Green Goblin's Last Stand, and one of my most favorite indie films next to Bad Taste. The director, Josh Dixon, made this in high school, starting sometime in around 2005. Josh Dixon made it with both friends from high school and his church in Orange County, California, and he teamed up with his youth group friend Dan Hogan, who didn't know him too much until this. Dan Hogan didn't even think they would actually do a Zelda film, but it was made a reality.
I knew Josh, but I didn't really know him, just from youth group at church. But one day he decided to approach me on Instant Messenger, and he asked me, "Hey, would you be interested in doing a Zelda movie?" First of all, I figured, okay, this is probably like an afternoon at his house. And second of all, I figured he probably will never do it. So I just said, yeah, sure, just to get him off my back.
Josh Dixon wrote the first draft, which had elements such as Erdogan, Link having a little brother named Chiron, and the Sage of Darkness himself. He stated he found the script to be crappy, though he said he thought it was cool at the time and sent it to Dan Hogan.
I written a script already. It was a crappy script. and I pitched it to Dan. At the time, I thought it was a cool script.
Dan Hogan utilized ideas to write his own script where he wanted to add more to the characters and character development. He especially created the elder character played by his father, so that the character of Link was shaped by someone and not a character who just came out of nowhere.
Sage of Darkness template was written by Josh. He included some of the major elements, such as, like, for instance, Davik, and the character of the trainer is also the Skull Kid. And then Kyron having a link with a little brother and having the little brother get taken out of the picture halfway through the movie. Those were originally Josh's ideas. But where I came in is I wanted to take sort of the bare bones template and turn it into something that would not only appeal to Zelda fans, chronicling each of the games, not just solely basing it off Ocarina of Time, but referencing ones from the Super Nintendo and even as far as the Old Man in the original Zelda. But I wanted to do justice to that and also make a story that was worth watching.
He also got the title of Nostalgia Supervisor, where he made sure to add in famous elements from the games where it made sense, such as the "It's dangerous to go alone, take this" line. Their first studio name was Titus Films, with Dan Hogan's co-production being Beyond the Box Productions. Dan Hogan went to help the cast with the production, talking to friends from school and church, and he also casted a close friend, Michael Stevenson, an aspiring actor, who was born with deformed hands, which they use as a plot point for his character Davik.
I think I've known Josh Dixon, the director of the movie, for a while. We began our friendship early on in our lives, and I think we both shared a passion for Zelda and movie making. We both kind of grew up and developed our senses of we wanted to make movies and a Zelda movie kind of at the same times, I guess. His dream was to make movies. I'm more of an actor. That's the thing that I like to do.
He also helped with driving because Josh Dixon had a license but was still new and couldn't legally drive others yet. Connor Osborne, who played Erdogan, wasn't too big of a Zelda fan, not against it or anything like that, but was interested in playing the villain, and Blake Henderson played Kyron as he was a huge Zelda fan. Dan Hogan played as Link, which was an afterthought, but he also played a few fill-in roles such as the voice of Skull Kid and Dark Link, Lumpy the Moblin, and the voice of the King. Natalie Fieldbush, who played Zelda, had experience in theater acting, which she utilized in this film.
How would she react saying this, or how would she handle this kind of situation? Being a stage actress, when you're coming from the stage to standing in front of a camera, there's big differences in how you act. When you're acting, you have huge movements for something. Like if you're trying to gesture something, you have to push it out very far so the audience can see. Whereas on screen, you can do this, and that's enough.
With the exception of some shots, they did not film at night, but they instead used day for night shots with filters. And because they couldn't do much to accommodate for the sounds, they had the actors dub the dialogue in post later for those scenes.
And all this stuff, I'm like, that's not going to work. This is going to be terrible. We ended up, long story short, having to loop everybody's dialogue for every scene at Hillcrest Park. We had everybody come to my house in a quiet, solitary room and record your voices, trying to lip sync on screen.
Centuries of memories were housed within these walls. Centuries of memories were housed within these walls.
Hillcrest Park was a major location for the ruins of the Temple of Time. They wanted to do the Temple of Time in their chapel for that, but it was being renovated, so they had to improvise. They did film some parts in the church, especially for the castle, and for the scene with Zelda meeting Link, they say in the commentary that they regrettably had to film there right after a funeral took place, which made them feel pretty horrible.
We had to wait until a funeral was over in order to use this room. We felt terrible, but
it had to be done.
I mean, we did this entire movie guerrilla style. Like, we had no permission whatsoever to film here. We just hope that they didn't kick us out.
There were also other improvisations, such as having Davik pretend to cut his hair so there wouldn't be a continuity error with his hair length.
More dangerous. Impromptu haircut.
Yes.
We actually went to a barber shop, and you can tell the story.
Oh yeah. On our way here, I had in the storyboards. I had a shot where the scene starts out with a piece of locks of hair falling on the ground, and then we see Michael has a haircut. Didn't have hair. Michael was not willing to cut his hair, and I honestly didn't really want to because that would be weird. So we stopped by my barber on the way to our location shoot, and asked, "Hey,
so weird.
do you have any brown hair? Have you cut any? Yeah, we got some brown hair. Can you sweep some up and put it back for me? Yeah, sure." And they give me this bag of cut up brown hair.
It was so gross.
It was really disgusting because they didn't cut it big piece of hair with scissors. It was like one of those buzzards, those buzzard things. So it was like all these little pieces of hair and balls.
Oh,
and so
sick.
it doesn't look consistent.
And what's the funniest part is so many people didn't even realize that his hair was a lot shorter than it was the scene before.
Yeah.
So many.
They also had to get a few people to play roles within a few days, such as Dan Hogan's brother for the young Sage of Light and their youth pastor Nick Bryce as Ganondorf. Nick Bryce had some theater training, which also really shows. They weren't going to have Ganondorf originally due to Erdogan not having the right build for it, but they wanted to do justice in the games and did a little bit of rewriting. One of the biggest scenes they filmed was the desert Kakariko fight with the cool action sequences and the music from Gladiator. It was a comedy of errors in the filming, and it was miserable for them since it was hot as hell and they were dressed in these dark clothes. They planned a panning shot with a wagon, but it just broke under Josh as he was filming, so that didn't work. They left the weapons near a bush to go to lunch, and unfortunately most of the weapons were stolen when they got back. I think even the Hylian shield as well. They mentioned that in the audio commentary.
One of my favorite shots is when Link and Davik charge Erdogan and his army. I'm going along them with the camera in a dolly shot. And then at first I was thinking, I can't run with the camera. It's going to get shaky. You're going to get wind in the mic. That's not going to work. So we used the little wagon we brought with all the equipment. And I was just going to sit on the wagon, and someone was going to pull the wagon alongside the actors as they ran, and I just hold it with the camera. That didn't work. We tried it. And so I start recording. I say, all right, go. And we start rolling, and then all of a sudden, there's a big crack, and everything just goes whoosh. And the wagon breaks in half. What happened? I look up, and I see half the wagon's over there, half the wagon's back there. And I'm thinking, okay, that didn't work, but I'll just run next to you guys. That'll work.
We had all of our gear, we had all of our swords and armor and stuff like that, and we left to go to lunch. We were all gone for like an hour. We're like, okay, we don't want to bring all this stuff back because we have to walk really far from our cars, and it's really hot.
We just said, okay, let's just hide all the props and swords and clothes and all that stuff like in the bushes and stuff, and they'll be there when we get back.
And we're back in like an hour, and we're noticing that like at least half of it is missing. A bunch of our swords are missing, and some of them are even broken, just like laying out there in front of us. We're just like, okay, this sucks. Half of our stuff is gone, and we still need to film that day.
As for the music, that is what first inspired Josh Dixon, as he had these ideas for cool sequences with the music, and he would walk around with his iPod to listen to his favorite soundtracks and envision the fight sequences. I've done a lot of the same things, and I still kind of do. As for effects, he got his friend John Summerford to do the CG effects on what they claim in the audio commentary to be a computer from the 1980s.
But they just look like idiots. So Josh was like, well, can you make him throw a fireball? So that's what I did.
For the filming, they used a large mini DV camera similar to the one I have, and I wonder if it belonged to them or if they rented it. They've also faced discouragement over the filming process, thinking that they'd never finish the film, thinking it'd never be good. They also compared theirs to other fan films, which makes me wonder if they saw the trailers for Hero Time and felt insecure because of it. I mean, I felt the same way when planning my own fan film back in the day. Josh Dixon would also work on editing for 48 hours, and because the original version of Adobe Adobe Premiere didn't have an autosave, the computer would crash and he would lose many hours of work, which must have been hell. I remember commenting about that at one point. They pushed on though, and this shot of the bomb was the last thing they filmed.
That's a wrap.
Josh Dixon and John Simmerford would pull all-nighters with editing and even skip school some days, which makes me wonder how that must have affected them, but I'm glad they made it through. Josh Dixon even went for 4 straight days without sleep and then had 1 day of sleep and rest. He had the first premiere, but the film wasn't finished and he wasn't very proud of it. He eventually got it finished for the real premiere, in which he rented a theater for Cinema City, and September 19th, 2008 was their premiere, which is when it all went really, really well. He posted it on YouTube and also did a blooper reel and behind-the-scenes documentary. He sold limited edition DVDs with those features and some Easter eggs, such as an alternate ending, one with Davik being like the Incredible Hulk, I remember that, and all of this was on YouTube. He had plans for sequels, but due to the impracticality of it all, he eventually canceled those. He decided instead to revive this as a book series he is still working on, which is going to be its own fantasy series and have nothing to do with Zelda. The first one, The Sage of Darkness, Balance of Fate, will be a retelling of this fan film story, and the sequels will be The Sage of Darkness, Hero Reborn, and Sage of Darkness, Remnant of Shadows. He posted some audiobook prototypes of it a while ago, in which it only retained the original characters such as Erdogan, Davik, Chiron, and the Sage of Darkness, with everything else, like Link and the Princess, being changed. Their friend Garrett Snook starred in the film as Link's father in the flashbacks. Garrett Snook is also known as DJ Ilnej, who did various movie reviews but then decided to move on with his music career, which makes me kind of sad because I would have loved for him to review some of my own movies.
Erdogan's army shows up, Link kicks ass. Erdogan kidnaps Davik, Link kicks ass. When Zelda's guard shows up, they both kick ass. There's not a single ass that goes unkicked.
He reviewed this movie along with The Hero of Time, where he praised this film due to having a better story, and he helped them with a few other short films such as Grail and Netflix and Kill.
Shit.
The studio name changed eventually, one of the first being Skyscape Entertainment, and I think they also used Car Post Films and some others I can't remember. They also posted 2 audio commentaries, one with Josh Dixon and Dan Hogan, and the other with the cast members such as Blake Henderson and Connor Osborne. The channel is now called The Josh Dixon Show, and some changes were made to the movie. In fact, the behind-the-scenes documentary also had the ending portion cut due to not being up to date with the Zelda mythos, and the DVD trailer and Easter eggs are unfortunately no longer on YouTube. I mean, I understand the changes made, but I do personally wish they'd upload some of those original videos as little bonus features for posterity. They can even be unlisted if they have to. As of now, and, it's also just unfortunate just how rare those DVDs are. I would love to get my hands on one of those DVDs, but it's a pipe dream. As of now, they're still working on the book series and doing podcasts. Dan Hogan especially is an English literature teacher and a father. That makes me think though, while I will be covering the Raiders adaptation, there is an entire book about it. I really love the chemistry and the story with these people who made this fan film, so I wish Dan Hogan with his English degree would write a memoir about the making of this film. I think that would be a really, really fun read, and it would be a really enduring story. As for my final thoughts, I want to discuss this film and what it meant to me on my own fan film and filmmaking journey. I first discovered YouTube in around 2008 through 2009, and I've had the idea of doing a Zelda movie since 2005, even trying my own stop-motion one in 2006. I planned from the beginning to do stop-motion, especially to make the film similar to Twilight Princess, but I had second thoughts when finding fan-made Zelda content on YouTube. This is when I first saw the IGN fake trailer, the trailers for Hero Time and Legend of Link. I watched the behind the scenes of this movie where I really enjoyed the chemistry between the people as a bunch of high school students working on a project. They reminded me of my church friends and friends from high school band and the Beta convention, and I wanted to make my own fan film similar to this, complete with bloopers, behind the scenes, etc. I also watched Garrett Snook's review, and I discovered him before the Nostalgia Critic. I have many great memories of watching this movie on my grandma's computer and working on scripts and concept art for various planned Zelda fan films. And I introduced my friend Graham to the fan film as he was my assistant writer and was slated to play as Link. I have a special place in my heart for low-budget movies like this, especially because they have so much charm and just capture an innocent time of kids being kids and doing something fun, something that has unfortunately been hijacked by the political TikTok generation. Even putting that aside, this movie has a great story to tell, and it made me appreciate movies for their stories more than their special effects. And honestly, I've become numb to big, glamorous movies and TV shows since there are so many of which have no soul or charm. They're basically just junk food. So seeing something like this fan film is very refreshing on so many levels. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Sage of Darkness, and please go check it out and give it more attention. The Hero of Time. Out of all the fan films, this is the one that got the most attention. One of the most famous fan-made feature-length Zelda movies ever made. The first case of it was the first trailer uploaded back in around 2006. When I first saw it, I didn't know what to make of it. My cat just bit me. But anyway, when I first saw it, I didn't know what to make of it. I'll admit that due to the production value, it looked to me very much like an old-fashioned fantasy film, like one of the old Robin Hood movies. The studio is called B&B Finishes, established in Atlanta, Georgia, and the director was Joel Musch, who previously directed a hillbilly horror short film called 2 Centimeters, and he also later directed the short Star Wars fan film Ruins and Reckoning. Aside from those, he has mostly done other work on other films or shorts. Based on information I've read about, this also had similar problems as Sage of Darkness, in which they thought they'd never get it done, and they seemed to have run out of budget and had to do stuff haphazardly, but they eventually came back to do updates on it in 2009. A second trailer was released, and it was clear that this movie was based, albeit loosely, on Ocarina of Time, and it had its own music from a guy named George R. Powell. It was based on the Zelda music, but it was its own compositions rather than reorchestrated music. It also had pretty high production value for a low-budget fan film, including costumes, props, CGI. Strangely, there was one video that showed what I figured was the Death Mountain set, though I'm not sure if it made its way into the final film, as most of that dungeon was green screen. Now, I'd show you footage, but I, for the life of me, cannot find any of it. They also had a website to do updates, and I'm pretty sure that that website isn't even active anymore. And after finishing a few effects, they started touring the film in festivals. They eventually uploaded the film to Dailymotion, which is where I first watched it. It had to be taken down and was eventually uploaded to YouTube. Something it had to do with copyright, though I think most of this was blown out of proportion, because I've heard that Nintendo doesn't really care if you do fan films as long as you're not making money off of it. They're more worried about fan games. I've heard two different sides. One was that they were touring and making money off of it, so they had to stop it, and two was that they had a deal with Nintendo for touring and had to stop the distribution whenever the touring stopped. Either way, it's still on YouTube, so it's not so much of a copyright thing, it's more how they were premiering it, so that was kind of blown out of proportion of it. Aside from that, it's on YouTube and has gained some cool review videos, including one from DJ Ilnej, one from Cookie Waffle, and one from Michaela Thorne, which is unlisted now for some reason. I wish they'd make it public again. As for my final thoughts, I'm a bit mixed on this one. I loved it when it first came out, but it lost its rewatch value over time, especially after watching Ilnej's review. I also think that Michaela Thorne's review pretty much perfectly sums up a lot of the problems I have. I do appreciate the effort, especially since it was just a fan film, but it spends too much time focusing on elements that don't need to be focused on. Because of that, I think this movie would benefit if it was cut to be a little shorter, maybe at just 1 hour. I'm also glad Cookie Waffle pointed this out, but this scene with the Great Fairy or Sage of Fire was way more uncomfortable than it needed to be. I mean, it stayed within hard PG, soft PG-13 levels, but it really didn't need to be in the movie. I also think Adam Boyer did a phenomenal job as Ganondorf, his problems being the script rather than with him. Also, interesting side note, they used this church for the Temple of Time, and I remember being excited in high school when we watched Remember the Titans and I saw this exact same church. That all being said, it is one of the most popular Zelda fan films, but that's all it really is just popular or famous. I wish there was more behind the scenes information like with Sage of Darkness. I wish they would have put more focus on the story and characters. But despite the problems I have, it's an important piece of fan film history and I recommend watching it still. Just lower your expectations. I lumped these two together because they're both made by the same person, Scotty Whitehurst, and they're both in the same continuity, so I'm counting them as one. So firstly, one thing that I didn't know until later, which is awesome in hindsight, is that Scotty Whitehurst actually lives in Mississippi, and he made this film here as well. He started the project in 2010 basing off the games while also incorporating a lot from the 80s cartoon series. He's a connoisseur of 80s nostalgic cartoons such as Zelda, Super Mario Bros., G.I. Joe, and he also did a G.I. Joe fan film which I might cover later on this series. He wanted to add the elements of Link being cocky and arrogant from the cartoon, while also being in love with Zelda, who doesn't see him the same way entirely and wants to be more independent.
Where I was going from the character is that I wanted sort of like a combination of the two from the cartoon and from the video game as well. I love what they did with the cartoon, how he was just kind of this cocky, overconfident punk kid.
As the film progresses and they start traveling and moving forward, you can see that Zelda really doesn't want to be there in the first place, but she has to be because she knows the importance of the journey, and her father's basically making her go to spend time with Link.
James Allen Knott played as Ganondorf, and it has changed to where he was once one of the protectors of the Triforce and chose to betray the others. Scotty himself played Link, and while incorporating the cartoon and video game, they focused more on the cartoon in terms of personality. They utilized both for inspiration for the costumes, especially for Zelda herself, since they made her more of a warrior-type princess than a damsel in distress. They left out the dungeon elements due to budgetary reasons, but they put more focus on the adventure and how Link and Zelda develop. They filmed at green forest locations for Hyrule, but they chose desert-like areas for when they got closer to Ganon, showing how darker it got with Ganon's power-hungry corruption. This had Ganondorf being defeated by the Silver Arrow like in the classic games, and they originally planned to kill off Zelda, then have Link be killed off by risking his life. They utilized these elements but changed it to have a more upbeat ending.
The first draft of the movie, I originally killed off Princess Zelda. Sorry, but as I got some more input from my writers, we kind of changed it around and make it to where have Link kind of sacrifice himself as the hero's sacrifice. So that meant more, and then a few more drafts later, we got to thinking that, you know what, this needs to be a happier ending. So we added in the wedding scene.
As for filming, Scotty used this mini DV camera. He no longer uses it, so I actually bought it from him in 2023 with my Christmas and birthday money, which I kept saving up for something special such as this. Some of the props were helped by Wesley O'Mary, whom I've also met. He actually lived next door to my buddy Matt for a long time. They put together this DVD for the cast and crew, complete with behind-the-scenes stuff, but it's all on YouTube for anyone who's interested. In the aftermath, Scotty worked on some other projects, including his G.I. Joe fan film. He also worked on NCIS New Orleans and Starship Farragut. I may have butchered that. He returned to Zelda to do a sequel called The Legend of Zelda: Oblivion Rising. This was very much a throwback to his first one, except the production value was amped up a little, and this takes place in the future at first, where Link, now an old man, has to travel back in time to a distant past of Hyrule, where he's young again. He meets one of Zelda's ancestors, although she still has the spirit of the goddess of Hylia, and they have to stop Demise, the source of Ganondorf. They improved the costumes, had moblins and Gibdos, and put more emphasis on the adventure aspects. They also have a cool moment where they go through a dungeon and fight Gibdos in the graveyard. I hadn't seen Legend of Neil yet at this point, so seeing this in a low-budget Zelda fan film was very refreshing. He also improved the story and characters a little bit, having more development with Link. Link is still cocky, but now he has to mature a little bit and get back in the swing of things since he's mentally still an old man who's just sent back in time. It does a great job at being a true sequel and not a rehash, as it follows elements from the first while also telling a new story in a new direction. I'd say that I love this one even more than the first one, as it has more story elements, it's a bit darker, it has more adventure and production value, and still captures the same charm from the first one. As of now, Scotty Whitehurst mainly does conventions, and I got to visit him on one of the aftermaths, which is where I bought the camera. I highly recommend these, and I think Oblivion Rising would be inspirational to anyone who has done low-budget films and wants to do a sequel. This one somehow went below my radar, which is weird because it came out in 2014, which was one of my favorite years ever. It came from a small studio called CK Productions, and it was also uploaded in clips before being uploaded as the full 1 hour and 10 minute long movie. While not a spoof, it is modernized and meant to tell the story in the context of a modern action flick a la James Bond or The Bourne Identity. It still has magic and fantasy elements, though it's still set in a modern setting and functions more like an action movie. Prior to this, CK Productions started with various spoofs of video games, as well as Star Wars fan films. They're still active with other video game spoofs and filmmaking test videos. Unfortunately, due to lack of behind-the-scenes content, there really isn't much I can say about this fan film, but I do want to bring attention to all these, and I think this was an interesting interpretation to take the basic Zelda story and reimagine it as an action movie. I only wish some of the characters had more distinctive clothing so you could tell them apart, which is honestly a problem I had with Legend of Young Link, but it was still an interesting little movie, and I hope to see more from these people. No, I put these two together because there's not much to actually say about them, as there's not much information online, aside from the actual films themselves. Based on what I've seen, it seems that A Link Through the Ages retells Zelda's story in a modern time, very akin to Legend of Link. And I know only from YouTube comments that A Link to the Past was filmed in Turkey and they had more limitations. It's understandable that most Zelda fan films omit the pointy ears, and I was considering doing the same in mine. I changed my mind about that because I saw the Triforce Prophecy and the pointy ears, and I saw the pointy ears that they used, so I decided to order cheap silicone ears online to go the extra mile, bump the lamp, I might say. In one of these comments, they mentioned that the whole reason they omitted the pointy ears in A Link to the Past was because of their terrible economy in their country, and that utilizing the pointy ears would have added unnecessary costs to their budget. They already had really great costumes and pretty good makeup and green screen effects, so I agree that the pointy ears would have been superfluous. They also incorporated Ganondorf in Gerudo form rather than Ganon in pig form, which makes perfect sense for their budget. It omits the dungeon crawl elements, focusing more on Link and Zelda surviving in the Dark World, but it tells the story good enough in an abridged form. A Link Through the Ages is also a fun watch, akin to Legend of Link. I just wish they'd do more behind-the-scenes content and bloopers. I really did not have much to say about these, as there isn't too much information about them in the first place, but I still wanted to bring attention to them among the other Zelda fan films, and I hope others will check them out. Now this here is my own Zelda fan film that I made. I don't want to toot my own horn or act egotistical, and I have talked about the history in the behind the scenes, but I still have a little more to tell on the history of how these other fan films shaped me, so I'll be discussing all of that. Firstly, the idea of a Zelda movie started all the way back in 2005 when I was 10 years old and in 5th grade at Summerall Elementary. I wasn't aware of film adaptations of video games having a huge stigma around them, and I became interested in the concept of making movies, where I decided I'd make a Zelda movie in the future. I got my first video camera as a birthday present in 2006 when I was 11, which I used to film a lot and do practice stop motion. I tried my own Zelda fan film simply titled The Legend of Zelda and the Master Sword. I wasn't very good on titles and I didn't know too much of the Zelda lore or mythos, so I didn't know how to do the formula properly. This film, of course, was never finished, and I kind of abandoned the project when working on other ideas. One of these ideas was a ripoff of Ghostbusters, which later evolved into Mindworms, basically a Ship of Theseus type of situation. I got interested again when playing Twilight Princess. While I've matured and have a much greater appreciation for the Wind Waker, I was admittedly not a fan of the art style of the game, so the idea of Twilight Princess being a little edgier and having Link as an adult was a breath of fresh air to me at the time. I decided I'd do a stop-motion Zelda fan film, and there'd be a dark version of Hyrule with a spiritual girl named Mindy who helps Link, and Link's village is ravaged by these creatures. I had some name for it, I don't remember. Yeah, I basically copied Twilight Princess a bit. I built the models and wanted my mom to make the costumes, and I kept up with this from 2006 until 2008, though I never got any actual work done due to my inexperience. One of my biggest regrets was not knowing that I could just animate stuff out of sequence and then put it together in editing, so I missed out on so many projects because I felt I needed everything done before I could start. In 2008, I came across YouTube and watched various Zelda stuff, including Adam West Lapdog's Zelda Abridged series, which I absolutely love. I also saw the Hero Time and IGN trailers, which I believe were real Hollywood movies at the time. I was very naive and didn't know the difference too well. I also saw the behind the scenes of the IGN trailer, which gave me a lot of ideas on what to do with special effects for my Zelda film. I eventually read the mangas, which taught me that I didn't need to have all the puzzle-solving formula elements from the game, and the same also applied to when I saw the Hero Time. I then saw Ilneja's videos, which taught me that as long as I tell a good story, most people will forgive the bad special effects. That's why I saw Sage of Darkness and all of its behind-the-scenes content, which gave me a lot more confidence and ideas, which also inspired me to go live action instead. It also had a lot that I love to add to my films, such as the self-applied PG-13 rating, behind-the-scenes content, the DVD trailer. It was around this time that I started getting into the horror genre, so I planned some ideas to go alongside Zelda. In 2010, I saw parts of the Triforce Prophecy when it was new, and that also gave me some ideas on how to do the films. I still wanted to do something a little different though, so I wanted to try to incorporate some dungeon crawl elements, utilizing combinations of live action and stop motion, similar to Clash of the Titans and Land of the Lost. I experimented with some miniatures, and I experimented with different scripts. I had one idea for a live action movie, and I also wanted to do an animated adaptation of Ocarina of Time in the same vein as Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, while also borrowing elements from Hero Time. My original Zelda idea, which I wrote in 2010, was The Legend of Zelda Amulet of Darkness. It would start in a village similar to Ordon, and Link's childhood friends would be kidnapped by moblins and later go to Kakariko, just like in Twilight Princess. Link would have to get the first 3 pieces of the Amulet of Darkness, then get the Master Sword, and then get some other MacGuffins while also trying to control the darkness the amulet would give him. He'd also have 2 fairy companions, and he'd fight the Moblin King in Kakariko Village and send him off a cliff. Here, this place would have been Kakariko, and we had a small hill that we'd pretend was a cliff. And I think in this script I also had a character named Artigan, who of course was based off of Erdogan from Sage of Darkness. At the same time, there was a moment around either 2010 or 2011 where I thought of doing a practice dungeonless fan film similar to Sage of Darkness and Triforce Prophecy, where I would play as Ganondorf and my brother would be Link. In 2011, I wrote a new script that was a direct adaptation of Ocarina of Time, though having its differences. It would introduce 3 original characters to travel with Link and Sheik, and there'd be a desert fight scene after escaping the thieves' hideout inspired by the desert fight in Sage of Darkness. Link would come to terms with his mistakes with Dark Link in the desert, and some elements from Hero Time were borrowed, such as Malon, Talon, and Ingo running an inn and the Spiritual Stone segment being omitted for the fear of it being too long. I later re-added the Spiritual Stone segments, where I decided my Zelda movie would be 3 hours long with 2 intermissions, and I'd do the same with a Majora's Mask fan film, which would also have a few original characters. I wanted to film this in spring break of 2011, and I'd also film a horror idea at my grandma's trailer called They Hunt Again, and they'd both be my first feature-length movies. I initially wanted to get cousins, church friends, and school friends, and for bigger scenes we'd have people in costumes in front of green screens and use stop-motion miniatures for the background. I had high, unrealistic ambitions, so those never got made. I still worked on ideas with my friend Graham, and we came up with many ideas for the Ocarina of Time story. For one, instead of Link the Goron, there would be a different Goron prince who helps Link, and he and Mido would have been played by my late cousin Keith. We also used inspiration from the Hero Times Goron for the Goron makeup, and my uncle would play as Rauru, Darunia, King Zora, and the Great Deku Tree, and we'd use CGI for the fairy. From the beginning, I planned that this film would be my very first to have CGI, while also having a good amount of practical effects. I'd walk around Hickory Grove and envision these locations as Hyrule, always daydreaming of how it would look. I kept this up for a while, and wanting to be creative and do something, I decided to do a stop-motion Ocarina of Time movie with my action figures. It took 2 days, so before my senior project in 2012, this was the most ambitious thing I ever did. I also worked on how I'd combine the effects, such as using puppets for close-up shots and CGI or stop-motion for distant shots. We'd also use CGI for Morpha, but I came up with a replacement creature as a backup. I wanted to do a puppet for Baby Volvagia, because one of the biggest ideas we had was to incorporate the Volvagia subplot from the manga as an emotional moment for character development. One of my initial ideas was to do a direct adaptation of the manga. I also tried working on ideas for a large puppet of Dadango, and wanted to use an excavator machine and dress it to look like a dragon for Volvagia, where I'd use cardboard for the sets in this part. Here I decided instead of using too much chroma key for the dungeons, it would be much more charming and fun to have sets built and use chroma key and miniatures when necessary. In 2013, when I started college, I toyed with the idea of doing a mini-series based on Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and this went through 2014. I was rewatching Land of the Lost with my cousins and figured I'd do a TV show similar to this using the same kind of effects. My cousin Tucker would be young Link with Graham being adult Link. My cousin Maddie would be young Zelda with my cousin Sean being adult Zelda. I even envisioned a sequence where Zelda is trapped while Ganondorf is poisoning the king, whom I named Adric after a Lego knight, and Impa would help Zelda escape her room. Here we'd use parts of my grandma's trailer for these parts of the castle. I also wanted to do Majora's Mask, especially when watching MC Prophet's Zelda Symbolism series, where I wanted to utilize all these themes and theories. I kind of abandoned the project a little through 2015, especially since that was a depressing year for me and I was dealing with some of my friends being lazy, not to mention I was more focused on doing They Hunt Again and Mind Worms. I still kept the Zelda idea in the back of my mind, and after watching Kubo and the Two Strings in 2016, I decided to try to do Zelda as a stop-motion movie, especially after finishing Paranormal Kids. Around 2018 to 2019, I thought of doing a stop-motion Zelda movie loosely based on Ocarina of Time. Here, Link would leave Kokiri after having a celebration with the others, and the Great Deku Tree would send him. He'd meet Zelda and travel with a guard to grab something from Death Mountain, and the Zoras would help them. The guard would be revealed to be Link's long-lost uncle, who is then murdered by Ganondorf, also kind of taking the role of the wounded guard. Link would pull out the Master Sword and be chased by Phantom Ganon. Link would get the help from the Gorons and be told that the Lens of Truth would help him see Phantom Ganon, so he'd grab it from under the Kakariko graveyard and find out that his parents are buried there, making him question his heritage. He'd return to Kokiri and reveal himself, where he'd find out his heritage and find out that the Great Deku Tree had passed on. And he'd also make amends with the bully, Mido. He is then kidnapped and taken to Gerudo, where he escapes the Thieves' Hideout into the Spirit Temple of Sheik, a recurring character, and Sheik is revealed to be Zelda. After accepting his past, Link is gifted with the Master Sword's power to destroy Phantom Ganon, and then they go to defeat Ganondorf. It would end in a bittersweet moment where Link as an adult returns to Kokiri to engage in that year's celebration as a tribute to the Deku Tree. I kept this idea, but was still focused on finishing Mind Worms. While in Florida from 2019 to 2020, I felt that I still wanted to do at least one live-action Zelda movie, so I came up with an idea nicknamed Budget Zelda, which would downplay a lot of the original ideas while still staying true to them. I really took it seriously in late 2020 after finishing Mind Worms, as I was now in my fulfillment era to fulfill a lot of ideas I never got to do. I narrowed a lot of it down, but I knew I was seriously going to want to do the Shadow Temple. After working on Whispers in the Cellar and Last Tapes from Winston Camp in 2021, I enlisted the help of new friends and some cousins to start production in summer of 2021. I first filmed the Shadow Temple, Castle Dungeon, and Hyrule Field scenes, where I got my friend Maddie Welsh to play as Impa, which was perfect. I got Eric to play as Link's uncle, basing him off of A Link to the Past. After some ups and downs, I continued through 2022, where we really filmed again and got a lot more done in the summer of 2022. We managed to have good, beautiful days, though some cloudy days served as necessary evils for a location such as Death Mountain, the Breach of Demise, and the Graveyard. I also got to utilize a ton of locations I originally wanted to use back in the 2008 to 2014 era. In between graduate school, I got a few friends to film some pickup shots, especially at my apartment. When starting, I was working 2 jobs and living with my parents, so I had the money to sparingly buy all the stuff I needed. During later production, I was in an apartment and having to pay my own bills. Right now, I'm with my parents in Colorado, but I'm currently working 1 job while hoping to go to Tennessee, Georgia, or Louisiana, and I'm having to pay a car bill as well as a phone bill compensation. The last things I filmed at around the end of 2022 or beginning of 2023 were the scenes of Link on his horse, which was nice. I did various special effects, including stop motion and miniatures inspired by The Lord of the Rings and Ray Harryhausen. I utilized CGI and I wanted to utilize more, but I was very limited. I am proud of the stop motion models I made though, as they have a very fairy tale type of quality. I also got voices from Matt, who did a really great job with the hammy over-the-top personality I was going for with a campy rep. I think he may have been a little high when doing the voices of Aghanim. With some fight sequences, I also got to edit multi-camera stuff, which was great. I then had to work on the editing, which went on until I moved to Colorado, and I finalized the project in around August of 2023. I put together behind-the-scenes stuff and Easter eggs. I gave some DVDs to my coworkers at Target, and I posted on YouTube with all the behind-the-scenes goodies. As for my final thoughts, I don't want to be egotistical, but I will say this is one of my most favorite movies of my own, next to The Unholy Land, Mind Worms, Last Tapes from Winston Camp, and The Castle of Draco Martin. It was a great journey, and it was refreshing to get it all done, especially if it's not, even if it's not entirely how I originally planned it to be. I even incorporated elements from my previous attempts, such as the kids being kidnapped and going to Kakariko. That being said, I don't want to act like I'm better than other fan films. I still hold all the others to a high regard, even the weaker ones like Hero of Time, as they helped shape not only the journey of this film, but my entire filmmaking journey as well. I also still love to watch Legend of Link, and Sage of Darkness will always be my top favorite Zelda fan film. My film also has its weaknesses, such as the fight scenes. I wanted to do things other fan films didn't do, such as the dungeon crawl elements and MacGuffins and fairy tale stuff. However, I never wanted to try to make my films better than the others. I just wanted my film to be different. All in all, I hope you all enjoyed this film, and I hope you check out the others in this video as well. So, as for the community of Zelda, featuring Zelda fan films, I felt that mine was the 10th one. Again, I'm lumping, Oblivion Rising and Triforce Prophecy into one, since they're of the same continuity. I also didn't know we'd have another one after mine, but then this one came out. The Legend of Zelda Rising Darkness is a Zelda fan film that has been in production for a long time. Some of the first videos about it date back to 2013, and they continued on until about 2019, though it got a little more niche and below the radar. They were in high school when they started it, and the director, Nathan T. Rousseau, sorry if I butchered that, played Link, just like in the Triforce Prophecy. Impa is a major character, looking like a cross between her old lady persona and young warrior persona, similar to what I did. Just like me, he also tried to do an Ocarina of Time movie long ago, and the trailer for the unfinished project, dating back to 2008, is on his channel. They worked with various props, CGI, costumes, and makeup, and they also had a killer story, just like Sage of Darkness. It starts with Link in a village, and we see great chemistry between him, his friend, and the other villagers, including a cute moment with a kid who looks up to Link. This is important for a turning point that I'm not going to give away. Link and his friend Valdric have to travel with Impa, and Ganondorf has a sidekick who reminds me of Wizrobe from Legend of Needle. Due to budgetary reasons, there's no dungeon crawl aside from them meeting Zelda in the castle dungeon, but there are great D&D-like adventurous moments. They have to retrieve the Moon Pearl from the desert, and Link is mortally wounded, where he must retrieve the Master Sword. Dark Link helps Link, and Dark Link is also similar to the hero Shade. Just like Sage of Darkness, Dark Link teaches Link about controlling his anger so that he can fight properly. That's all I'll say so I don't give too much away, so on to my final verdict. This is probably my second favorite Zelda fan film after Sage of Darkness, and it is very reminiscent of that film too. It started back a while ago, and it contains many of the idiosyncrasies of those types of movies, such as looking like it was shot on mini-DV and edited with old-style iMovie and old-style After Effects. This isn't even a criticism, it's something I genuinely admire. Admittedly, I can be numb to a lot of movies that look really fantastic and perfect, as I mentioned before, and I usually hate that so many low-budget movies are trying to look more high-budget, as it takes away the charm and personality. Because of that, seeing this Zelda fan film being like this in a modern age is very refreshing to me, and I applaud this film and hope for a sequel, or even another original idea from these filmmakers. They should also write a book about the making of their film. I'll write my own autobiography as well. It just won't be published until about 2036. While my Zelda fan film is done, I still want to utilize the mini-DV camera to do something similar to these films. I'll revive the They Hunt Again idea, and to do a Zelda-like film with the mini-DV, it'll likely be a fan film based on Illusion of Gaia, if I can't do that one professionally, and it'll be a nice throwback to these types of films and movies. All in all, it is a nostalgic movie. It has a great story to accompany it, and it has become one of my new favorite Zelda fan films. It goes without saying that Zelda is a game that redefined the adventure game genre, and people like me who love adventure are drawn to it. We'd use our resources outside to do our own adventures inspired by Zelda and Indiana Jones, and I did the same at my grandma's place in Hickory Grove, Mississippi. Many people have done their own fan films to recapture these adventures, and it creates great memories to look back on, unlike today's TikTok generation, though I hope stuff like this can influence younger kids to go back to that innocent time of, indie filmmaking. These types of films have always had a special charm, and it really shines through in these fan films I covered, very akin to the Raiders adaptation. I also wonder if these are the only feature-length adaptations, or if there are others. Like I said before, maybe there's one or two people who tried it on hiatus in the 90s and never got released. Maybe there's more people working on them, like the Legend of Link remake. And then of course there's Legacy, which will hopefully come out soon. I'm gonna save that one for its own video. I remember also reading of some upcoming ones, including The Legend of Zelda Prince of Terrace, and one called The Legend of Zelda Witch of Hearts, in which I remember reading the script for that one. Maybe they'll be like Joe Morris's idea and be kind of lost to time, or maybe they'll come up one day later. Many ideas range from serious adaptations to spoofs, some crass, some family-friendly, and many ideas interpret themes and other elements in mythos. Admittedly, Hero Time is still my least favorite due to not putting enough emphasis on the story and characters, but it's still influential and should be respected for the effort and passion. I understand that doesn't automatically make a film good. I'm looking at you, Chris Stuckman, with your Madam Web review, but since this isn't like the Disney Lucasfilm slop and is just a fan film made by a group of friends, it's harmless. I also really love Sage of Darkness and Rising Darkness, and Legend Neo and Legend Link are both funny and charming spoofs that are clever and unique. They all inspired my fan film, as well as other films in general, and they showcase how a good film adaptation of a video game can be done if there's enough respect for the source material. I hope this can bring more attention to these projects, and I hope they can inspire younger filmmakers for any Zelda fan film, maybe fan films based on other ideas, and maybe just original ideas in general. And I hope they can be utilized in film education. Most film professors will be stuck up and act like pretentious art house films are all the rage, but stuff like these fan films are more engaging to a younger audience, and I definitely use them if I ever became a film instructor. I hope some of them can have a special edition with bonus features and new ones, and I hope to read a book about the making of all these, and I hope this video is insightful for all you, whether you're a Zelda fan, or even a film fan.